I made my first million by breaking one rule. Everyone tells you the same thing about making money. Follow the rules. Be patient. Work hard. Don't take shortcuts. I believed that too. Right up until the moment I broke one rule and everything changed. This is not a motivational story. This is the story of how I made my first million and why I almost wish I hadn't. Before the money, my life looked painfully normal. No rich parents, no connections, no secret advantages. I rented a small apartment, checked my bank balance every morning, and calculated how many days were left until my next paycheck. I wasn't starving, but I was stuck. And worse, I could feel time slipping away. People don't talk enough about that feeling. Not poverty, stagnation. When every month looks exactly like the last one, and every smart decision leads you nowhere. I did everything right, and nothing worked. That's when the rule started bothering me. The rule was simple. You must never mix opportunity with uncertainty. In other words, don't risk what you can't afford to lose. It's good advice. It keeps people safe. It also keeps most people exactly where they are. The first chance to break it didn't look like a chance at all. It looked stupid. A late-night message. A half-formed idea. No guarantees. No contracts. Just a possibility and a deadline that felt uncomfortably short. I remember staring at my phone, rereading the message. My brain listed every reason to say no. Too risky. Too unclear. Too easy to fail. And then a quieter thought appeared. What if this is the only door that opens? I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was excited, but because I was terrified. I knew that if I said yes, I'd be breaking the rule that had guided every responsible decision in my life. And if I said no, nothing would change. The next morning, I replied with one word. Yes, I didn't know it then, but that single word cost me my comfort, my certainty, and eventually my peace of mind. It also started the chain of events that led to my first million. At first, nothing happened. No explosion, no instant success, just work. Confusing, exhausting work with no clear finish line. I couldn't tell anyone what I was doing, because I barely understood it myself. Weeks passed, then months. I was investing time, energy, and money I technically shouldn't have risked. Every logical part of me said I was making a mistake, but something else kept pushing me forward. Not greed, fear of going back to the life I was trying to escape. The first real problem appeared quietly. A missed expectation, then another. Deadlines shifted. Promises became vague. The people involved still sounded confident, but something in their tone changed. I felt it before I could explain it. The kind of feeling you get when the ground starts moving under your feet. I asked questions, not too aggressively, just enough to feel reassured. The answers were polite, logical, and deeply unsatisfying. Nothing was technically wrong. Nothing was clearly right. That was the danger, because uncertainty doesn't scream, it whispers. At that point, I could still walk away, lose some time, lose some money, keep my life intact. That was the last safe exit. I saw it clearly, and I ignored it, because walking away felt worse than losing. Instead, I doubled down. More hours, more responsibility, more risk. I told myself I was being decisive. In reality, I was becoming emotionally invested. And that's when rules stop protecting you. The first unexpected payment arrived on an ordinary day. No ceremony, no notification sound that changed my life. Just a number on a screen that made me stop breathing for a moment. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was proof. And proof is addictive. That payment rewired my thinking. Suddenly, the risk felt justified. The uncertainty felt temporary. Every warning sign became part of the process. That's another rule no one talks about. Once success shows up once, you start believing it's guaranteed. The second payment was bigger, big enough to silence doubt, big enough to make plans. I upgraded small things first. Nothing dramatic. Better tools, more comfort. I told myself I was still being careful. I wasn't. Behind the scenes, the pressure was growing. Expectations multiplied. Decisions became faster, heavier. Mistakes suddenly mattered. I was no longer just participating. I was responsible. And responsibility changes how fear feels. It stops being abstract. There was a moment late one night when I realized I couldn't stop anymore. Not because I was trapped, but because I was winning. Walking away now would mean admitting that the risk had been unnecessary. That's a hard thing to admit when money is involved. That's when the rule finally broke completely. I stopped asking, "Is this safe?" and started asking, "How far can this go?" That question doesn't lead to balance. It leads to acceleration. And acceleration doesn't care whether you're ready for the destination. The night everything almost collapsed didn't feel dramatic at first. No panic, no alarms, just a message that arrived too late and said too little. Something had gone wrong. Not fatal yet, but wrong in a way that could trigger a chain reaction. I sat there, staring at the screen, doing mental math. If this failed, I wouldn't just lose progress. I would owe time, favors, and explanations. The kind of debt you can't repay with money. For the first time, I felt real fear, not of failure, but of exposure. That's when the option appeared. A solution that technically worked. A shortcut that solved the problem immediately. And a rule that said I shouldn't use it. Not because it was illegal, but because it crossed an ethical line I had always respected. I told myself I was just being practical, that everyone in this space did it, that this was how the game was actually played. The rules suddenly felt naive, outdated, like something invented by people who never made it far enough to need it. I remember the exact moment I decided. No drama, no internal speech, just a click, a confirmation, a quiet action that changed the direction of everything that came after. The problem disappeared almost instantly. The system stabilized. Messages changed tone. Deadlines moved back into place. On the surface, everything looked fixed, but something else appeared in its place. Momentum. Money started moving faster, bigger numbers, shorter cycles. Decisions that used to take weeks were now made in minutes. I wasn't chasing the million anymore. I was keeping up with it. That's when I stopped counting. Not because I didn't care, but because counting made it feel real. And reality brings questions. Questions bring doubt. Doubt slows you down. I couldn't afford to slow down. The million didn't arrive with fireworks. It showed up quietly, hidden inside a routine transaction. I noticed it only because my hand froze on the mouse. The number was there, undeniable, complete. I had crossed the line. I didn't feel joy. I felt relief, and then something worse, a strange emptiness, mixed with the realization that I couldn't tell anyone exactly how I got there. Because the rule I broke didn't just change my outcome, it changed the story I was allowed to tell. After the million, I expected clarity, confidence, a sense of arrival. Instead, I felt watched not by people, but by my own decisions. Every success now carried a question. Would this still work if someone looked too closely? I became careful in a new way, not conservative, strategic. I avoided explanations, changed how I spoke about work. Even simple questions made me pause longer than necessary. That pause was the first sign something inside me had shifted. Opportunities kept coming, bigger ones, cleaner ones. Ironically, I could now afford to play by the rules again, but going back felt impossible. Because once you cross a line and win, the line stops feeling real. I told myself the rule existed to protect beginners, that I was past that stage. That experience justified exceptions. This is how rationalization works. It doesn't deny the rule, it redefines who the rule applies to. Sleep became lighter, not worse, just thinner. I woke up before alarms, replaying conversations that hadn't happened yet, planning explanations for questions no one had asked. Success had removed financial fear and replaced it with something quieter. The strangest part was how normal everything looked from the outside. Same routines, same face in the mirror, same city, but internally it was carrying a version of the story that couldn't be shared without edits. That's when I realized the real cost of breaking the rule. It wasn't legal, it wasn't financial, it was narrative. I had won, but I no longer owned the full truth of how. People assume money gives you freedom. It does, but selectively. It frees you from some constraints and binds you to others, especially when the path you took can't be fully explained without consequences. I tried to simplify things. to clean the structure, to slowly distance myself from the decision that started it all. But systems remember, momentum has memory, and you don't reset it by pretending it never existed. That's when the final realization arrived. The rule I broke didn't make me rich, it made me fast. And speed is powerful, but it doesn't come with brakes. You have to build those yourself. And sometimes, it's already too late. For a long time, I didn't talk about that period at all. Not publicly, not privately. I told a simplified version when I had to, one that skipped the uncomfortable details. It was easier that way. But easier doesn't mean lighter. People often ask what changed after the first million. They expect practical answers, habits, mindset, strategies. The truth is simpler and harder to accept. Money amplified who I already was, including the parts I hadn't examined closely enough. The broken rule followed me quietly into new projects, new decisions. Every time I faced uncertainty, I felt its presence, like a shortcut I knew existed. Once you know a door can be opened, it's hard to pretend you don't see it. There were moments I almost repeated it, moments when breaking another rule would have made things easier, faster, more profitable. Each time, I paused a little longer than before, not because I was wiser, but because I knew the cost now. The strange thing is this: I don't regret making the million, but I do regret how easy it became to justify the choice that led to it. That's the part no one warns you about. Success doesn't corrupt instantly, it convinces. Looking back, I'd see the exact second where things split. The moment I chose outcome over process, results over alignment. It worked. That's what makes it dangerous. Rules that fail are easy to abandon. Rules that work after you break them are harder. If you're watching this hoping for a formula, there isn't one here. I can't give you the rule to break, and I wouldn't, even if I could. Because the real rule isn't universal, it's personal. It's the one you'll have to live with afterward. Some people break rules and feel nothing. Others carry them quietly for years. The difference isn't morality, it's awareness. And awareness tends to arrive late, usually after the outcome is already locked in. I made my first million by breaking one rule. It opened doors I couldn't have reached otherwise. It also closed a few I didn't notice at the time. That's the trade nobody puts in the headline. So if there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's not inspiration, it's clarity. Every shortcut has a price, even when it works, especially when it works. And the most expensive cost is often the one you don't see until you've already paid it.